So here we are.
And here we are.
All of us.
So I'm Prue Ashby with London and Partners, the Mayor of London's promotion company. We promote London around the world to attract businesses, visitors, events, conferences, and students into London. I've been with the organisation 10 years, mainly covering North America. So helping North American companies actually set up and grow in London. And I've also had 2 years in New York and came back about a year ago. So this is why I think I've been asked to do this panel. So that's me, and I'd like each of our panelists to introduce themselves to you. Just a few minutes on who you are.
Start with me. Okay, we'll go that way. My name is Fred Schmidt. I am Director of International Affairs for Capital Factory. Capital Factory is the largest incubator, accelerator, investment fund in the state of Texas, one of the 8 biggest in the United States. And we've been around for 9 years now. We've got about 250 companies under investment, 700 in our overall equity portfolio. We do about 1,000 events a year in our space. Last year put 125,000 people through our space. So we're located in Austin, Texas, and our mission of the last year has been guided by a principle we call the Texas Startup Manifesto. And so what we've been doing is working on connecting Austin with Houston, with Dallas-Fort Worth, and San Antonio. And those 4 cities are 4 of the 11 largest cities in the United States. Austin is number 11 now, about to jump to become number 10 over San Jose. And those 4 cities, combined with the state of Texas, if we were once again our own country, as we were for 10 years in the 1800s, and by the way, Brexit has inspired Texit talk, so we never know how these things will play out. But if Texas were its own country again, we would be the 10th largest GDP economy in the world just by ourselves. And we have a 170-year-long trading history with Great Britain, and I am Austin's ambassador to London and the UK because the city of Austin and the London borough of Hackney are formally twinned, and I lead that relationship for the last 6 years from the US end.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is James Klein. I'm a corporate partner at UK law firm Penningtons, Manches. I had the pleasure of setting up our San Francisco office back in September 2014, just over 3.5 years ago, and have been in San Francisco every month for 10 days since then, so just over 3.5 years. What we've been trying to do is assist through working in the ecosystem to assist US companies and investors with their UK activity, introducing them to not just UK companies, but to other European companies and also companies further afield as well into the US ecosystem. And also to introduce European companies directly as well into other types of investors. It may be venture arms of large corporates, it may be customers, suppliers, distributors, strategic partners that we're working with at the moment. So very much part of the ecosystem on the ground out there, working with key companies and key investors and trying to bring companies closer together with strategic partners.
Hi, I'm Eyal Malinger. I'm an investment director at Beringea. We're a UK and US based VC fund. Between those 2 funds, we manage about $700 million. In the UK, we're based in London. In the US, our fund is based in Detroit, Michigan, and invests predominantly in the Midwest, but also sometimes on the coasts. We have 65 companies in our portfolio, again, both in the UK, US, and Europe, depending if you count UK as part of Europe or not. A lot of the work we do with our UK businesses or our US ones is market entry into the other. And so a large number of the companies we invested in over the last few years was really how do we help them once they've reached a certain scale in the UK, growing into the US. It's a hard transition, and any help these companies can have is great, especially when we have on the ground support in Michigan.
Hi everyone, I'm Alysia Silberg. I'm a UN ambassador for women's empowerment and entrepreneurship. I also host a radio show in 60 countries. I get to see some cool stuff happening around the world in terms of entrepreneurship. As a result of my journey as an entrepreneur, I was originally from South Africa. I've built companies in South Africa, in the UK, in the US. I'm incredibly fortunate. I now am a venture capitalist, so I've changed hats, but I'm on the ground the whole time with the entrepreneurs. I'm a huge champion for British entrepreneurship because I came from South Africa, where we have a bit of a chip on our shoulder as far as building companies and tech skills and those things, and I was given a huge opportunity here about 10 years ago. One of the companies that I co-founded is one of the biggest players in the world in employee benefits and rewards. So we have 10 million customers. We've now, the company's entered the US market. It's been done very well for itself. So I wouldn't have been able to do that had it not been for support of the UK tech community and corporate partners. And I traveled a journey in terms of what it meant to be an entrepreneur in what was perceived as a third world country, and the importance that governments play and banks play and infrastructure plays in countries such as the UK. That's why I'm so appreciative of the work that you guys do. So if you guys want to be guests on a radio show, or you're looking for interesting investors who love the journey and are passionate about what you do, you're free to talk to me. I like talking to other VCs as well. I like interacting with very special people. So thank you for having me.
So I'm going to start off with the challenges side of things. So if a UK company is wanting to explore the US market, expand over there, they may have some potential clients, or they may be looking for VC funding. What are the key challenges that you see that the UK company would face? Who wants to start with that one?
I'm happy to start, and I'll choose a non-trivial one, and that is culture. I read a really interesting piece of research someone told me, and the research explored which relocations worked and didn't work. And it was very surprising that to see that actually it was American relocation, and the America to Japan was one of the most successful ones, but one of the least successful ones was America to the UK. And you think, why would that be? And the reason would be is if I'm a US CEO and I'm moving my family to Japan, I'm going to learn about the culture, I'm going to learn the language, I'm going to learn how I should behave, because everything is foreign to me, and I come in assuming it's foreign. Whereas as any American moving to the UK can probably attest, and vice versa, that while we do speak the same language, the business culture is different. The culture is different. The way we talk about things is different, and this is where people sometimes run into problems and challenges. So I would say actually one of the most interesting things is spend the time, especially coming from the UK to the US, learning about the culture. How is business done? How are meetings run, right? So that'll be my...
From my point of view, in dealing with many companies that are trying to access financing in the US, I don't think many companies really get themselves properly investor ready. And that might be because they don't understand the VC audience. They haven't done enough due diligence themselves on which VCs may have, for instance, synergies in their portfolio, which ones have conflicts, what's their structure like, and why are they actually approaching VCs in the first place. But that's more on the funding side. I think I agree with the culture point. I think that's very, very, very important. And also thinking about the long term, about having senior members of the team based out in the US, being able to commit enough time to grow a relationship with the connections which they need to actually make their business work in that market.
So I do this stuff all day long. This is what international affairs is all about at Capital Factory. The relationship between Texas and the UK, specifically since we're here, I mean, I know the subject is global ecosystems, but we're talking about Britain and the United States. Texas specifically has had a 170-year-long relationship with the UK. And so when we were an independent nation 170 years ago, the UK was the first foreign country to recognize that relationship. And the UK was about to set up an embassy in Houston when we sort of got taken over by the United States. And the state of Texas actually did have a consulate and an embassy here in London, just off Trafalgar Square, for about 5 of those 10 years. And so we've had a long, deep trading relationship. We are among each other's greatest trading partners. And so as I grow and scale our companies beyond the US into predominantly the European market initially, it's always through Britain. It will always remain that way, even after Brexit. We may have to have a few other additional backup plans, legally, financially, et cetera, you know, with whatever, Ireland, Amsterdam, somewhere, depending on how all this Brexit stuff shakes out. But it's not going to change the fundamental landing place that London and the UK as a whole represent. On the other side, going into the US market, what Austin and what Texas as a whole represents is an alternative to what goes on the East Coast and the US West Coast. So those are very established traditional ecosystems. They're also very expensive. They have high costs of state taxation, and they are in many ways kind of closed ecosystems. You know, they really, New York, San Francisco, they work really well for what they do if you're on the inside of that. It's hard to get on the inside. So what Eyal was mentioning about the Midwest and Detroit and Michigan, I grew up in that area too, so I know it very well. That's the alternative place. I've been in Texas for 27 years, have started 4 companies there and grown them, taken one public, sold one to a public company, et cetera. That is the capital efficient place. We have no state level taxation, very inclusive. Again, 4 of the 11 largest cities in the United States. So if you can get traction in Texas and our 4 major cities, scaling your business to the rest of the United States, to the East and the West Coast becomes very, very straightforward. And so we have cold beer, we have music, and we have a great startup mentality, and we have this great British Texas affiliation. So our doors are wide open, we're open for business, and we welcome UK and European entrepreneurs to join us there.
I just wanted to add to what you were saying, because I'll first talk to you about my role as an entrepreneur and what I experienced, and then I'll talk to you about my new life, which is being an investor. I grew up in South Africa. I worked in the UK for a long time, and we all in this room have a certain way of communicating, and it works for us. But Americans are trained to think in a very specific way. So I'll take for example, an email. I had to learn to write an email which is 1 line long. That is how Americans like to communicate with you. I was used to writing a paragraph long. And it seems like a small thing, but each one of these things makes your life harder. I was one of those entrepreneurs that I grew up in an environment in South Africa where you got someone to sign an NDA because that's how we were conditioned, that you can't tell somebody about what your business is doing because they're going to steal it. Day one when I was in America, I had a VC turn around to me and say, like, that shows a naivety on your part as an entrepreneur. You don't ask VCs to sign NDAs. Now the problem is I sit with a VC hat on, and when entrepreneurs from here approach me and they're like, I want you to sign an NDA, the problem is it's not going to work. It's not that I don't understand. It's that you're not going to get anyone in Silicon Valley to sign an NDA with you, and you're going to go through this journey as well. So there's a series of things that it's almost better to hear it from someone who's been there and done it, like the entrepreneurs that are succeeding in the US, that are coming home here to build their businesses or experiencing things that you haven't experienced, and say to them, okay, what were the 10 things no one would tell you that actually you wish you knew before you went? Because it's all the small stuff that actually makes your life incredibly hard. Like I sat at Y Combinator's demo day a couple of months back, and I felt bad. I've built a voice analytics platform, and it was very good technology, so I understand how nuances work and tonality and that. And I sat there and I thought, I'm listening to 140 pitches, and you get to a certain point where you are being bombarded by the world's best entrepreneurs, some of which come from the UK, from the emerging markets, and the only way your brain can actually cope with the information that's coming at you is you start tuning into hearing certain things. As VCs, there are always things we want to hear, and you switch off. And if the accent is difficult to understand, it's not personal. It's like you're just trying to get through the information. You always switch off, and you don't mean to. but that's the way it is. And when I actually made that mental note that, wow, I'm actually only listening to American accents, it worried me. It really, really worried me, because I was like, well, I've been on this journey and this is what I'm doing. I can only imagine what everyone around me is doing. So there are times, and I've had these conversations, and it's a disruptive thing to say, but there are times where you may be a world-class entrepreneur. You may be brilliant at what you're doing, but sometimes bringing someone in that is extremely talented at pitching, at building a sales team, at adding value to what you're doing is the difference between having a good business and a great business. And I know it's often hard to hear this stuff, but my co-founder in South Africa was a world-class salesman. He went to America and they said to him, listen, okay, you may be brilliant in your country at selling, you need to bring an American in to sell. And it was a horrible thing at the time to hear, but they were right, and we had to travel on that journey. So there's constantly these cultural things that the sooner you learn them, the better off you are.
Thank you. I think, and I think a discussion on the US ecosystem is quite tricky, because there are 50 states and no doubt 50 at least, or probably loads more than that, ecosystems. But I totally agree with with what we're talking about here. We run a program called the Mayor's International Business Program, where we take high-growth London companies and help them globalize. And we're now starting to look at not only New York, San Francisco, but go to Atlanta and Dallas and Austin and Denver and Chicago and other cities where there's opportunities and different sorts of ecosystems and different ways of entering the market. But also that cultural side is really interesting, because when I was in New York, a British entrepreneur came over and he was starting to talk about his product, and in a typical self-deprecating way, he was like, well, it's sort of, this is it, it's all right. And I said, there's no way you could talk to anyone in New York like that. You've got to be way more positive and punchy and visionary about your product. So I wanted to sort of switch into the VC landscape and talk about what you're seeing in terms of VC investment, maybe trends, things they're picking up on, and what US VCs are looking for. Oh, we were late starting.
Shall I go with that one, and very quickly? So the landscape out there is obviously very interesting at the moment, I think, in terms of trends, certainly in terms of actually looking at UK companies at the moment. We actually asked that question of a number of US-based VCs, not just on the West Coast, but on the East Coast as well, in terms of what they're looking for in trends and things like that. And actually, we've got a copy of the report outside called From the Golden Gate to the Golden Triangle, looking at what they look for. And it was very interesting, because I suppose it's hard data, but when we asked the question of the VCs, and we said, what excites you? And they said, well, firstly, it's, in terms of the UK, it's the talent, it's the technology talent. Secondly, it's investable science, life sciences. Thirdly, strong IP. Fourthly, actually, which I was interested in, which was quite far down the list, was commonality of language. And fifth was low valuations, which of course really cuts across all sorts of different subsectors of technology. Fintech, which has been mentioned time and time again today, still remains, from what we see, to be an interesting subsector for US, especially West Coast VCs, who do think the UK, a lot of them think the UK is about 5 years ahead. Basically because we have the Financial Conduct Authority, we have one regulatory body to deal with, whereas in the US there's many. And it's quite simple for US VCs to perhaps invest. We've obviously seen a number of transactions in that space. But I do think very quickly, I do think that there has been a shift in sort of mentality towards, as more and more fantastic companies in Europe, not just in the UK, but across Europe, have grown and developed very, very quickly. And looking at the herd mentality as well, where a number of VCs have started to have some successful investments and also exited some of these businesses now, we're starting to see more and more interest from US VCs generally into software services, which still remains, I suppose, the most investable company. And also on the East Coast, we're seeing a lot into life sciences and hard science and materials as well, and medtech. So I suppose there's quite a lot there, but I'll pass on to someone else.
I'll try and be quick on this one. I hear many entrepreneurs complain, oh, you know, you UK VCs are so conservative, you don't see the big picture, Americans are so much, you know, can see and I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think Harry Stebbings in one of his latest podcasts said that UK VCs worry what can go wrong, whereas US VCs worry what can go right. And it's a gross generalization, but I think quite a valid one. But the one thing I will say is, you know, the valuations we see in the US are sometimes an order of magnitude more than what we see in the UK. A Series A will be 10 million at 40 pre, whereas in the UK will probably be quite a bit lower. But I think people forget that for us, the UK VCs especially, the exits aren't happening, right? So if you're a US VC, you look around you, you see you know, GitHub bought for $7 billion by Microsoft. I can probably count quite quickly $1 billion exit in the last year to date, whereas in the UK, there have been none. Right, there have been almost no exits over 250 million in the last 3-4 years, right? It's quite easy to think through them and what they were. So if you're a UK investor, you're looking to deploy capital, and you're thinking, well, the most likely outcome here is a 200 million exit and a really good scenario, a 300 million exit, and you want to make 10 times your money, your valuation is not going to be 100 million. And so we have this just driven by what we see in the market, what we see by the acquisition landscape in the UK. We don't see the US players buying so many companies in the UK as they used to before. The IPO market hasn't really ramped up for tech companies here. Yes, we have the AIM, but we know what trades on the AIM. It's not great companies. And so I think there's this dichotomy, which I think probably will, over time, this gap will close because we do have some great companies in the UK. And are we going to start seeing the US acquirers coming here and buying? Possibly. Are we going to see more European acquirers coming to the UK and buying? Possibly. And I don't know, wishfully thinking we'll see more IPOs of tech companies in the UK in the next few years.
Great points from both of you. I couldn't agree more with what James is saying. I get to work with some of the best startups in Silicon Valley. I'm incredibly lucky. And the number one challenge they have is talent. It's a huge issue. It's a constant, ongoing fight for it. And the UK is a hub for incredible science talent. And often I don't think people realize how talented they actually are here. And our companies are coming. They're coming to the UK. They're opening their companies. They want to employ scientists from not only the best universities. There are some very, very talented people here. And it's a brilliant opportunity for everyone. And the government is incredibly supportive. Every time I interact with the government, they're willing to open whatever doors they can. They're willing to do whatever they can. I know I was on the train with the mayor yesterday back from Liverpool. Everybody is willing to do what they can to make this as successful as possible. And again, it's a health sciences hub. The UK has the NHS. It's the best database in the world for health sciences companies. We've got companies from Australia that have got significant funding from Silicon Valley, from Canada. We've seen some incredible companies here. I was just recently at Cambridge. And yeah, there's a ton of very, very interesting science. And as VCs, it's an arbitrage opportunity to take really talented entrepreneurs to Silicon Valley and go on that journey with them. It's a great opportunity, so everyone wins.
So we're not a VC, so I can say whatever I want. We take the alternative view. We are seed and early stage investors. We are partners with entrepreneurs. We don't swing for the fences. We care about getting companies to not go out of business, but if they have to, we help them get out of business quickly and bring the talent back into the next opportunity. We invest in awesome teams, awesome products, and we are really happy just to get companies to second or third base, create long-term stability, real employment, things that add value to our community and to our ecosystem. And if some of them, we have a few that are now well tracking toward becoming billion-dollar companies at that kind of valuation, that's great, but that's not our goal. So all that 10x stuff in 3 years, we make that stuff up. It's not real. What we really care about is creating real companies like we used to do as a society back in the day, in the industrial era. That stuff still matters, and most of the companies that I worked for that were really successful, we exited, we did all that stuff, they don't even exist anymore, okay? Our IP is in the basement of some big company that bought all our stuff, and it's, that IP has now gone up the food chain. They don't even know what's in their archives anymore. So that's like a complete waste. The stuff I'm proudest of are the legacy businesses that 20 years later are still around, they still employ people, they're still having year-over-year growth. So, we a lot of times get really caught up in our tech culture and our investment formulas, but that's not really the substance of creating real economies and real businesses in the world and what the world needs. So my 2 cents. Drop mic.
Thank you, Fred. And I know that the buzzer's gone, so what I'm going to do is just do one sentence from each of you. And if these people in the audience would like to connect with the US ecosystem, so one sentence on your best tip as to how people should connect with people that might be valuable and useful to them over there. So for example, mine would be paying it forward. The American attitude is very much pay it forward. If you do something for somebody, connect someone for somebody, do something, it'll eventually come right back. And I think that's a great attitude to have, and I would say that would be a tip if I was going over there, and I would recommend people to do. So one final.
So for me, I was very involved with a global network of young professionals. It was an exclusive network in South Africa. I got to DC and I was like, oh God, I'm an American, I have to succeed. And the first thing that popped into my mind was to reconnect with them in South Africa. It was pretty ironic. They made me chair of a global organization, and the $1 billion foundation that funded this organization was in DC. So from the moment I got there, I got to interact with billionaires, some of the most extraordinary people in America, and I was doing it through my pay it forward attitude. Like, I never got paid to do this job. It was a lot of work, but it literally changed my entire time in America, because from the get-go, I was part of a very, very, very powerful network, and these people wanted us to succeed. So tap into your networks, always pay it forward, because you never know who's going to help you next time around.
I'm completely with you. If you can move to DC and become the chair of a $1 billion charity, do that. That will really help you working with billionaires. My one tip would be warm intros. The US is a big place, and cold emailing sometimes work, but there's, especially in the VC community, there's nothing like a warm intro. So work your network, go through people to people to people until you get this warm intro into the person you want to do. That's the way to do it, I think, in the US.
Yeah, gosh, following that, one sentence. I guess be prepared, and be prepared to spend some time. I'm not sure there's any real quick wins. I think you need time and patience to make your mark out there. And also to think about the amazing networks and organisations and associations in whatever city you're going to. I can't speak highly enough of London and Partners, obviously, as an organisation, just one such organisation. You have things like the British American Business Council, the Department of International Trade. There's lots of organisations that can give you really great information, guidance and advice before you turn up. So I think be prepared and think about maybe sort of building in a time period to allow you to perhaps visit on a number of occasions to build up that relationship.
Good lawyers, good lawyers.
And good lawyers. Actually, excellent lawyers.
Or not. Don't use lawyers if you can avoid it. Just do it,
Just get sued.
Their job is to tell you not to do it. So, as entrepreneurs, we just do it, and then we'll figure out the consequences later.
We'll sue you, no worries.
Beg forgiveness, not ask permission. So my advice would, sorry, James. My advice would just be honest, be authentic, deliver on what you say you're going to do, and look for the long term. It's about the long game. Life is about the long game. We build relationships. We build community. So every relationship that we build feeds on the others and the whole ecosystem. So it's not transactional. It's not about the next year or 2 years. It's about what are we doing long term to really add value to ourselves, our community, our teams, and the world around us. I mean, we need that kind of attitude because we've become very transactional on so much of what we do in life. And right now, particularly in complicated political times, We need to continue to stay focused on the things that will survive the crazy cycle we're all in at the moment, which we know historically will work itself out over time, So business kind of figures out where the future is, governments catch up when they can.
So just one thing, Americans are incredibly generous with their time and energy. Like when you said, there's a certain way to do things. If you go to America and you say, I'm here to learn and grow, but I'm not saying it to Americans. Feel it physically, that you're there on a journey, you're incredibly lucky to be there, and you're there to learn everything you can. You will succeed. But if you resist it, you will change in ways you couldn't possibly imagine. And there's a certain way of doing business, and if you give it the chance, it's going to be very different to everything, as everybody will tell you. In every state, every place, it's completely different. But if you resist it, you'll never succeed. Rather give into it and embrace it and say, wow, I'm going to look back in a year's time, I'll be a completely different person, but it'll be for the better. That's the way to succeed in America. I don't know if you...
Texas is the best.
Well, on that note, we're going to be chucked off the stage. So thank you very much to my amazing panelists, and thank you for listening.